from RiskPoint. I'm Shannon Connor from RiskPoint, and I specialize in health insurance for employers with 50 or less employees. I want to introduce instead of him going around saying who he is, I'm going to introduce him first. This is Matt Davis. He is the director at RiskPoint of Health Employee Benefits, but he's got 15 plus years of experience. And Matt is not only my coworker, but he's also a mentor. This guy knows so much. And not only that, he's always been on the cutting edge of whatever comes out with the medical field. When electronic enrollments portals were coming out, Matt was the first one to get on it and make sure. He's very good about self-funded, unbundling, anything like that that's innovative and coming out. His goal is to get what's the best for the employer to help cut costs and the most coverage for his employees.
That's the best introduction I've ever had.
He's a great guy.
Matt Davis, RiskPoint Insurance Advisor. It's nice to meet all of you. Thanks for having us.
I'm Chelsea Stockner. I am an office manager at Sunrise Medical Consultants.
I'm Kathy Gordon. I am the CPA, Aldrich CPAs and Advisors and past president of the Chamber.
Good afternoon, Raquel Moore, Green State Representative, House District 19, South Salem Turner Homestead.
Rosenbaum, Membership Manager, Salem Chamber.
Andy Squires, Finance Director of Church of the Word.
Katie Cossack,
Linda Layton, Benefits Coordinator for Church of the Park.
I'm Helena Jones. I'm also HR at I'm Ashley Martin, HR Manager at
And Krista Washington, I'm the business HR manager at Fitzpatrick.
Same company, operations manager, Skinny.
Rich Duncan, Rich Duncan Construction, also on the board.
Kim Thatcher, Real Estate Center.
Mike Kelly, private employee.
Zachary Sawicki with the Salem Chamber. Thanks for being here today, you guys. Really appreciate it.
Kreig, Standard Insurance. Happy to be here.
Yeah. We want to really thank you all for coming, and especially to the Chamber for hosting this, and Tyler for taking time out of his day to do a webinar and seminar here with us. This is the second time we've done with Tyler. He's amazing. He's very knowledgeable. We really appreciate him partnering with us, because at RiskPoint, I don't know if many of you know about RiskPoint, but we are an Oregon company. And so when laws like this come in effect, it also affects us, because our owner is Oregon, lives, breathes, works Oregon, and his tagline is locally owned, locally awesome. So you know he's a Gen Xer. But when things like this happen, it happens to us too as employees. So at this point, we're very wanting to know that want you to be educated. It's very important to us that you also know what's going on. As like we want to know what's going on. I want to know what's going on with my paycheck. I want to know what's going on with my benefits. So it's very important for us to also educate you also. The last thing about RiskPoint that I just want, besides that we're Oregon, we love to educate. We're totally transparent. Do you know how much you're paying your broker for your policies? Ask us, we'll tell you. We feel you should know what you're paying. We feel you should know what your coverage, we want you to ask, we want you to know, and we want you to feel empowered. It's kind of selfish also for us. If you guys, the more you guys feel, the easier it is for us to work with you. So it's very important. And so I really appreciate Tyler coming, because this is something that's important to us. We want you guys to know what's going on, especially when it comes to your health insurance and your paycheck. So
thanks, Shannon. Yeah. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. So real quick, I'll do a quick bio for Shannon and for Tyler, and then we're going to go ahead and so instead of our previous public policy meetings where there's questions throughout, Shannon will do a presentation and Tyler will do a presentation, and at the end we'll allow for questions. And the whole purpose of today is really to understand the mechanics of this new legislation, and so that way you can go out and have the understanding for your own businesses, but also for your network and the businesses in our community. So with that said, let's start with the bio here. So Shannon Connor, benefits account executive, RiskPoint Insurance Advisors. She's been in the insurance industry for over 5 years, and she specialized working with clients who have under 50 employees. She loves to work with smaller employers to find benefits that fit financially and with the company's goals. Then we have Tyler, who's is a senior employee benefits consultant with the Standard Insurance, has been for the past 15 years, where he has consulted with employers to create life, disability, dental, vision, and absence management solutions to offer employees. So with that said, we'll go ahead and have,
Actually, Tyler, go ahead.
Yeah,
we'll have
you got it.
Tyler start us out.
Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. All right, thanks, everyone. Good afternoon. You know, I've been in this market here for 10 years and being headquartered in Portland, Oregon, Standard has been plugged into this leave law as it was passed in 2019. Certainly, we live in this space with disability insurance because a piece of this looks and feels like short-term and long-term disability insurance. And then we also manage FMLA and OFLA for some of our larger clients on the unpaid leave basis. So we've been as plugged in with the state as they've created these rules for this program as much as we can. With that said, it's an ever-changing program. They're meeting weekly. They should be done with all the rulemaking hopefully in September. So some of this, what we're talking about today can change. But to the best of my knowledge, as of Friday of last week, this is up-to-date information. You're more than welcome to raise your hand and ask a question throughout because there's a lot of content here and you may forget that. I'm happy to entertain those because other people might be thinking the same thing. Same thing online if you want to hit that with the chat. And if you want to start the presentation here, go for it. See if it
You
changes.
can send me the slide afterwards.
I certainly can, yeah, provide those. That'd be great.
That will dictate how we.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so what we're going to go over is what's covered, specifically the plan design, where they are at with the rulemaking process, and I think we're almost to the 11th hour, which is good because it's been about 2.5 years in the making. I certainly want to give you all an idea of what else is out there in regards to what a private plan can do for yourself or anyone else in your network, and then leave you with a few resources because as things change, Standard again is certainly plugged in and we have a blog about it, but then the state also has their website where they've been communicating a lot more in 6 weeks with updates. All right, so really what we're talking about here is 3 types of leaves. Okay, the main one that'll probably be most utilized will be what's called family leave. It really looks and feels a lot like paid FMLA for those employers that offer that, if they're large enough to offer that. So that's bonding or caring of a loved one. And that would be 12 weeks for those bonding scenarios with place adoption or a newborn, and then caring for a loved one that has their serious health condition. The second type of leave is really own serious health for the employee themselves. And again, that looks a lot like short-term disability for those that are familiar with those programs. And then Oregon is actually only the second state to offer paid leave for what's being called safe leave for employees that are going through sexual assault, harassment, stalking, and those sort of things. So obviously employers probably don't want an employee that's dealing with those sort of things, trying to work a full-time job and handling those things. So there's up to 12 weeks available for those types of leaves. All right, so some of the unique features to kind of give you an idea. Oregon is the 11th state to roll out a program like this. And these are just a few of the features that are a little bit different than what other states have done. And the first is the broad definition of a family member, okay? So traditionally, as FMLA and OFLA look at it, family member really means anyone you're related to by blood or marriage. This program is a lot more broad to the extent that it's basically anyone that an employee has an affinity or a close association that would be considered a family member. Okay, so as a carrier that plans on paying claims for these types of leave, we've asked the state, well, how do we know this person is going to take care of a family member? And so at claim time, as of now, the state has said employees will simply be asked to sign an attestation stating, yes, this is a family member. Okay, so it's a significantly broad definition beyond someone that you're related to through marriage. Okay. The other thing to keep in mind is employers look to fulfill obligations in other states or look at other mandatory requirements like Oregon sick leave, and also look at just regular company sponsored PTO, vacation. You know, some larger employers offer parental leave or other special kind of leave. This is in addition to all of those sort of things. So obviously the employer is still going to have to continue to offer FEMLA, OFLA, Oregon mandated sick leave if they're large enough. But this is going to force employers to really look at the company sponsored leaves that they aren't obligated to offer. Like maybe it's a really robust 800-hour sick leave bank or whatever it may be, because this is law and you have to offer paid leave Oregon to your employees as an employer. Okay, so it's not just affecting like a short-term disability policy, it really is affecting all leaves that you can offer by an employer. And then another unique feature that Oregon is allowing for employees to take is intermittent leaves down to as little as 1 day at a time, or an 8-hour increment. Okay, so as we manage leaves for a lot of our larger clients, these are the type of leaves on an unpaid basis that are very tricky to not only administer, but for the employer, knowing when and where your employee is going to be working when they're in and out of work to go take a parent to chemo twice a week or whatever it may be. This sort of flexibility to the Oregon program will certainly give some employers some headaches because of that intermittent nature. A lot of other states, require employees to take a week at a time. So kind of keep that in the back of your head as you consider an employee population and what they may use this for. Not to hammer the definition of a safe leave, but it's for folks, it's for the employees that are going through those scenarios you see in front of you, or if a dependent is going through those scenarios, the parent, if they're the employee, is allowed to take up to 12 weeks. And of course, again, as a carrier, we're asking, well, what sort of information do we need at claim time? Are we going to ask for restraining orders? Are we going to ask for police reports to prove this individual has gone through this? And so far, the state has said it's going to be similar to an attestation saying, yes, I've experienced this or am experiencing this. And then that will receive approval.
So, Tyler, so what I'm hearing is right, is that I can say my neighbor, who I feel like is a family member, needs me to take them to chemo or whatever, and I can take this.
Correct. Next slide, please. All right, so this is really the most important slide here. It's the nuts and bolts of the program. Okay, so the question is, who's eligible for this program? It's essentially any employee that's earned $1,000 over the previous 4 quarters. Okay. Now, in the traditional employee benefit space, we live and breathe member definitions that are 20 hours per week, 30 hours per week, where you meet eligibility for medical, dental, life, vision, or other states have put in, similar to FMLA or OFLA, 950 hours must be worked by an employee in the previous 5 quarters in order to meet the eligibility for paid leave. Oregon, you meet eligibility very quickly as an employee. Okay, even if you're making minimum wage, it doesn't take that long to earn $1,000. So employers that have a pretty high part-time population, seasonal population, this is going to hit them a little bit more substantially because those folks traditionally don't get any sort of employee benefit. However, they're going to have to be covered by this program. Speaking of contributions, who's going to be paying for this program? Now, I'm speaking to what the state public option is currently. We'll get to the private plans here in a few slides. The state did finalize their payroll tax in May, taking the highest rate allowable by the law that was passed at 1%. Employees will be contributing 60% of that payroll tax, or 0.6% of their payroll, and the employer will be paying 0.4% of payroll. And you can see that annual wage cap will be capped out at $132,900. So for those high wage earners, the payroll tax will stop at that level. I do want to point out That number of 132.9 is a 2019 Western CPI index. The state could very well update that to a 2022 number, which would be above $140,000. If I was the state, I would probably update that so they could collect more tax on those higher paid individuals to make sure that pool is well funded come September of 23. As Jonathan mentioned, the program was meant to be taking contributions already at the beginning of this year to pay benefits January 1st of 2023. Fortunately, the rulemaking got delayed with COVID in 2020. So the contributions will start in the first quarter of next year. However, the benefits will be payable starting in September 3rd of 2023. So now the pre-funding that was planned for 12 months to generate a fund to pay these claims is starting out with just an eight-month fund. Okay, so kind of keep that in mind as you try and project what this payroll tax is going to do in the future. You'll see there that employers with less than 25 total employees do not actually have to contribute any sort of tax. They will not have to contribute 0.4% of payroll. And those employees will still only contribute 0.6% of payroll. They don't have to pay the full 1% if you work for a small employer. We'll get to kind of what dictates small versus large employers in a minute. I already talked about the broad family member definition. Certainly talked about the 3 buckets of leave reasons. Now, the wage replacement calculation is super convoluted. No state has really came up with something simple. Essentially, anyone earning at this time 65% or less of the state average weekly wage. Okay, so the state average weekly wage just got updated in July of this year. It's now $1,224.82. Okay, so if you're earning 65% or less than that per week, which is just about $800, you are going to get as an employee 100% of your weekly income. Okay. And then anything above that amount, you will get 50% of the remaining earnings. Okay, so what that kind of equates to is, as of the 2022 state average weekly wage, and I will remind you, they are not using the state average weekly wage for workers' compensation. That is a higher amount. It's in the 1300s. They have verbally mentioned the 1224.82. It has not been put in writing by the state because it just got updated. Okay, so that will update yet again July of 2023 to increase not only the maximum and the minimum weekly benefit, but the benefit percentage once that state average weekly wage is in place. But the bottom line is, as the numbers stand today, any employee earning $41,000 annually or less, they will get 100% of their weekly income for 12 weeks. You know, as a disability carrier, a lot of disability plans are set at 60% of income replacement because you certainly need to get an employee enough money to pay the bills and get by. But an income replacement much higher than that can lead to drawn out claims or durations of leaves. And so 100% income replacement, when an employee does not have any loss of income, obviously could lead to an incentive to actually either stay out longer or use this program. There are an additional 2 weeks of paid leave beyond the 12 with complications of pregnancies. And then keep in mind, if an employee is also covered by FMLA or OFLA, those may go beyond the 12 weeks they're on working paid family leave. All right, that's a lot of information. I'll end this slide with, even though an employee may be able to use this program and be eligible for this program after they earn $1,000 with the employer, they do not enjoy job protection while out on this program unless they've worked for that employer for 90 days. If they are afforded that job protection, the employer must continue their health care at the contributions they were contributing to before they went out until that employee returns. Okay, so that's obviously a pretty big financial hit to some employers that may have an uptick in these sort of leaves. Any questions, comments, concerns? Yeah,
So first question is, if the employee's contributing to their health insurance, do you still make those deductions from these payments?
so you have,
The state would be making the payment, so they have to forward that money to you?
that's a great question. So, because you as the employer aren't paying them anything else, how are you gonna get that money? And the state has been posed that question, and to my knowledge, they haven't determined on whether you can ask for that money while that person is out on leave. So obviously the concern is that person may be out forever or just never come back to your employment, right? And so a lot of employers have raised that concern, and the state has not said whether you can actually charge them for their portion of the premiums or yet.
And with these 25 employees, is that Oregon employees or any employees in Washington, Idaho? Or
Total employees, so if you have 8 in Oregon, but you have 30 in Washington, your total headcount's 38, you're above, you're 25 and above, thus you do have to contribute your 0.4%.
Part-time, seasonal and all that.
Anyone that's earned $1,000 for you.
No, I thought you said that, I got the impression there was a year waiting period that they had to, you said 4 quarters. So are they eligible as soon as they earn $1,000 or at the end of 4 quarters?
As soon as they earn $1,000. If they've earned $1,000 with you in the last 4 quarters, then they're eligible as soon as they earn $1,000. Yeah. What other questions do y'all have? All right, well, let's keep the ball. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
I have 2 questions.
Yeah.
The first one is, so when you were describing the family leave, the medical leave, and the state leave, you said they are similar to other ones. So does that mean that somebody can apply for one particular program and another one and receive money through multiple avenues simultaneously?
Great question, and I'm gonna tackle that as we talk about each individually. So that first bucket, the family care and bonding one that I said was similar to FMLA, the state has recently said that if an employee files for paid leave Oregon paid benefits, you as the employer can force them to also file for the job protection under FEMLA or OFLA so that those run concurrently. Okay, so I'm getting my check for paid leave Oregon for 12 weeks. You can force the employee to also apply for the FEMLA and OFLA so that when they're come back after 12 weeks, both have been exhausted. Yeah, now in regards to a short-term disability program, all carriers have built in their short-term disability contracts an offset with paid leave, paid disability or paid state leave programs. And so if an employee is eligible for paid leave, their short-term disability carrier will take that into account and see what their dollar amount may be. And then if that's richer than what they were due by their short-term disability carrier, they will just earn the minimum weekly benefit. For most short-term disability policies, it's just $15.
My second question was, what was the bill number on this in 19? Do you know?
I don't know it off the top of my head.
Thanks.
Yep.
I can track that down for you though.
Thanks.
Any other questions before we move on to the next slide? All right. All right, so being a lot of our population really close to the Washington border, and you've got employees living in Washington but working in Oregon, this has been really a tough definition to nail down, but as of now, really got to ignore where an employee resides. Unless they are truly a remote employee and that's their place of business, they're conducting all their business at their residence. As the employer, there's this localization test that the state is using saying, if you are reporting wages for unemployment insurance on that employee to the state of Oregon, that employee's work state is Oregon, and thus they need to be covered by paid leave Oregon. Okay. And now they've tried to give some clarity about, well, what about a contractor that does a 3-month job in Washington across the border, but they've done 9 months worth of work? Well, you can see here, the majority of wages are in Oregon, and incidental amount of wages are outside. that employee is still considered an Oregon worker. There's a lot of hope from many employers, not just those on the border, because you've got, you know, with COVID, and you've got a lot of work from home employees that are spread across the country, but may come into Oregon if the group is headquartered here for whatever, a couple times a quarter. Those employers have been hounding the state to give more of a definition to narrow this down. So while it's not as well defined now, everyone is hoping to get more clarity on what exactly is an Oregon employee. So TBD. Any questions on that? I know it's confusing, but when you use, you know, incidental and majority, it's like, well, what do those terms mean? So hopefully it's something with 51% of wages are earned from working in Oregon. They need to be covered, something like that. All right, next slide, please. All right, so this is really the timeline. It's kind of small. The state is in the middle, towards the beginning of batch 4 rulemaking. The key arrow there, the first white arrow, is September of this year. And actually, September 6th of this year is when the state is going to start reviewing private waiver applications to opt out of the state program. Okay, so September 6th for employers that feel like a private option is a better fit for them. Need to circle that on the calendar because that's when they're going to open up to start reviewing. The issue is batch 4, which isn't supposed to be completed until early September, is the rulemaking on what exactly that application is going to need. Okay, so carriers like Standard, well, we've been plugged in through and through, and what we've heard so far is each employer is going to have a plan document from their private insurer, or if they're creative enough or willing enough to create a plan document, an internal company sponsored leave that will meet every single one of these equivalencies, to give the state an understanding, yes, this is an equivalent plan. So there's going to be a plan document. We don't know how much detail it's going to be yet, as well as if you're working with a third-party carrier, a declaration of insurance stating, while it's only September of 22, I, ABC company, will be covering all my eligible employees for an equivalent plan with ABC carrier starting September 3rd of 2023 and signed. That's what we know so far. Again, batch 4 is really diving into the nitty-gritty of those. I know not only Standard have been quoting private options, but other carriers have started to as well. So keep an eye out for that. Next slide. All right, so I kind of mentioned what a small employer is. It's basically Oregon employees plus any out-of-state employees. Now this really, number 3, only applies to once the program is in place. Because you can take Oregon employees plus Washington employees, subtract any employees that are actually out on paid leave Oregon benefits, which obviously does not apply until September 3rd of 23. So if that is 25 or greater, the employer does contribute their 0.4%. I will tell you, there are a good amount of employers that will contribute the full 1% tax. Okay. We've been asked that by a handful of employers. You know, it's a tight labor market. They're going to spend it as an employee benefit. They know employees are going to be super frustrated with the new payroll tax of 0.6%. And if they can take it off their employees' desk financially, they're going to do so. However, for small employers, if you are truly under 25 employees, let's say you're 20 employees and not ever going to get to 25, you as the employer can contribute that 0.4%. If you do choose to do that, and one of your employees goes out for paid leave Oregon benefits, the state is going to offer you a $4,000 grant to hire somebody else. So, you know, your mathematicians or your folks that are a little savvy with a tax-free grant, let's say you have $500,000 of payroll a year, and you decide to pay your 0.4% of that. That's $2,000 a year in tax if you choose to contribute to this program. If even just one of your employees goes out, you get a $4,000 grant. If two of them go out, you get an $8,000 grant, and so on, up to 10 employees. So some employers are going to choose to contribute to the state program because it's still 0.4%, but from a dollar standpoint on that many employees, it's not a big cost. And as long as one of those employees goes out, they're going to get $4,000. Questions?
I do have a question.
Yeah,
So the grant is only if they go with the state program?
correct.
So if they
That,
go with the private program like you, they will not get it.
that is correct. And private insurers are not giving small employers free insurance. So they will be charging the employers their portion. Yeah,
Is that $4,000 grant covered through all the money is being paid through the same program, or is there a bucket where that's not?
my gut tells me, yeah. Well, because it's split out there, there's a $3,000 grant and a separate 1,000. I want to say the 1,000 might be a federal grant. I can't tell you for sure. Yeah.
So let me ask you this, so what would you tell a business owner that says, well, the state's going to give me $4,000, why should I go with you
For that small employer?
for the small employer?
Yeah.
I'll get to, yeah, so I'll get to the advantages of private plans versus public.
Yeah.
Yeah, in a minute. Yeah, but good question. What other questions on that kind of small employer piece? Awesome, let's go to the next slide. All right, so this is more detail. Batch 1 through 3 are already completed. Like I said, batch 4 really determines what that private waiver application process is. I did find out on Monday that they've actually kind of created a batch 5 for some smaller tweaks to some of the stuff that they tried to finalize in batch 2 and batch 3. So there is a batch 5, but from what I can tell, the 8 things they're going to tackle on batch 5 really won't affect the plan substantially. So that's where we're at. Let's go. All right, so private plans. Here's the situation with private plans. I've already mentioned September 6th is when the state starts reviewing those. Private plans must provide equal to or greater than what the state law has said, okay? You can't really get greater than 100% benefit, a 0-day benefit waiting period. But I've actually had a couple of employers ask for 18 weeks for parental leave. I've had an employer ask for 100%, no matter what the employee makes. And they have multiple people making over $200,000. So everyone's in a different space, but as of right now, standard, can't speak for my competition. We are just quoting an equivalent plan that checks every box, the minimums, right? So we will entertain a self-insured option. So the plans we've been quoting are fully insured, which means an employer pays us a constant premium every month. We take on the full risk and liability of the claims. If there's $20,000 of claims that first month, we pay those out and still charge that same amount of premium. A self-insured option would be with a TPA or a carrier where an employer is paying them just a per employee per month admin fee, say it's $3 a month, and they'll adjudicate those claims, cut those checks to employees, and then bill the employer back the next month, which again could be $0 of claims, it could be $20,000 of claims, right? So self-insured gives carriers a lot more flexibility. Say, yeah, you want 100% for everybody, great, you're gonna pay for it. Or if you want 18 weeks for parental leave specifically, great, it's gonna be your risk, right? So there will be some of that flexibility, but we had just a heavy lift on getting the capability to quote just an equivalent plan. So hopefully that flexibility down the road comes. And I will tell you, most carriers are, most groups are fearful of how often their employees are going to use this. So they certainly don't want to be paying the benefits. So the fully insured private plans are really going to be the way to go unless you're confident your employees aren't going to overutilize this. The other thing in private plan, must not do is charge employees more than that 0.6% payroll. Okay, so if a private carrier gives an employer a 1.8% payroll rate, well, if the employee can only contribute 0.6% of that, the employer has to pay 1.2% of payroll. Okay, as opposed to just 0.4% of the state. Most likely that employer is going to contribute to the state program because they're going to save 70%. Any questions about this? There's another slide on private plans as well.
So how often can the 12 weeks be used? So it's per year.
It's once per rolling 52 weeks. So it's not calendar year. So an employee can't take the last 12 weeks off of 23 and the first 12 weeks of 24. Every employee is going to be different. If I go out March 15th for 12 weeks to bond with my infant, and I use all 12 weeks, I don't have any more coverage until March 15th of the following year.
So it's actually 9 months look back.
Yeah. All right, so I mentioned kind of what we're getting direction on for batch 4. The one thing I did mention is a private plan application to the state has a $250 non-refundable fee. They have told employers that it'll be done through a system called Francis Online. So I've gotten a lot of stares and glares of, I'm not familiar with that system. So hopefully the state, because we're 6 weeks away from September 6th, gives more clarity on how people access that. Here's kind of the cadence of that. Assuming an employer gets approval in the first year, hopefully that's prior to January 1st, because if it's not prior to January 1st, you as an employer will have to start deducting employees' payroll tax, assuming that you may get denied that. Okay, so best case scenario, you get approval by January 1st. Each subsequent year for the following 3 years, you have to file again to the state and simply say, we've not changed our plan, and submit a $150 fee. Okay, so 3 years of 150, 1 year of 250, it's $700 for the first total 4 years to pay the state to opt out of their plan. Now, if you choose to make a change to your plan, maybe you're fully insured for the first 2 years, you realize your employees aren't utilizing it, and you want to take on the risk as the employer and go to self-insured, that's considered a substantive change. Even if you don't change the carrier administering that, you would have to submit 250 and kind of start over again. Let's say you're with one carrier for 2 years, that carrier gives you a 50% increase, and then you go to another carrier, that's a substantive change. And now you're back to the 250 starting all over for those 4 years.
Thank you. Tyler, as I recall, for the last time you did this presentation for us, the state was actually projecting a relatively low number of employees were going to apply for this waiver.
They said earlier this year that they only expect 90 employers in the entire state to opt out of the public option.
So to put this in perspective, I think we're going to be providing a proposal for 80 companies ourselves, just our agency. So if the state thinks that all the state that 90 companies are going to apply for a waiver, and our agency is going to do 80 companies alone, that is not even in the realm.
There's going to be thousands of waiver applications, and the state, even before gauging interest in a private plan, had already said that the waiver application process will take at least 30 days. So let's say the employer's the first application in the door September 6th, that means at best it would be October 7th. Well, when you staff a program to review 90 applications the first 3 months and you get 2,000 the first week, there's going to be long waits, and unfortunately your carrier can't do anything and you as the employer can't do anything, because the biggest advantage of a private plan is your private plan is not going to charge you until the plan is in place in September. We, it's a standard, and I'm sure other carriers are the same, we're not pre-funding this program. We're going to charge in September. So the best bet if a private plan fits you and your employees is to get that application in ASAP so that you can absolve yourself of the state programming contributions and then prepare for employee deductions and your portion of the premium come September of 2023.
So
Go ahead.
I have a question too. So if you apply for it, you pay the $250. It takes 4 months to hear back. You have to start paying into the plan if it's not approved, and then say it's not approved, so you just wasted $250.
So the state payroll deductions won't actually be due until the end of the first quarter.
Okay.
But the state has already said, as the employer, if you don't deduct, if you don't deduct from employees, you can't go back in April if you get denied and say, hey, we need 3 months worth of this payroll tax. At that point, it's all the entire employer's responsibility to cover that full 1%. So it would be a roll of the dice, but no, let's say you get approval February 1st. Like that's before the end of the first quarter where deductions are due. There is a deadline for the waiver applications of November 30th. If an employer does not submit by November 30th, they will at least be on the hook for first quarter of 23's payroll tax. So while that, for us procrastinators, because I'm one of them, November 30th seems pretty far off, but just keep in mind, if you're, as the employer, you're the 3800th application in November 29th, you're gonna have to payroll deduct in January, probably February, probably March, just in case you don't get approval until whatever that may be. All right, just mentioned that deadline, let's say you don't get it in by November 30th, you're on the hook for first quarter's payroll tax. You don't get it in by February 28th, you're on the hook now for the second quarter as well. And then July 1st would be the final deadline to opt out of the state program in order to not participate in the September 3rd effective date. All right. Not to scare everyone, but as I mentioned, Oregon was, I think, the 10th state to roll this out. California and New York were one of the really early ones. Connecticut and Massachusetts just recently rolled theirs out. Obviously, Washington being close by 2.5 years ago. Had some bumps and bruises the first 6 months to a year paying claims within 6 weeks. Connecticut, who rolled theirs out just recently, was only taking, when I say only, 4 weeks to pay claims. To talk about why a private carrier might be a better fit, not just standard, but most short-term and long-term leave management carriers, they turn around these claims in 4 to 6 business days. Okay, so your employees can either wait 6 to 8 weeks, or they can wait 4 to 6 business days. The other big advantage for employers that have a short-term or long-term disability program in place is a consolidated claims process for that employee. Unless you're filing for pregnancy leave, most short-term disability claims are not fun. You're having to tell your cancer diagnosis, your car accident story, whatever it is for your own serious health to your carrier, and then turning around and doing the same thing, the same paperwork, getting another attending physician statement to the state for your paid leave order benefit. If you can consolidate those as an employer to make it easier on your employee when you're going through a very difficult time, certainly makes sense. We'll go to the next slide, please. Mentioned claim turnaround time. A bigger issue, I believe, for decision makers and HR managers in other states that they've told us as we've managed their short-term disability program, the line of sight to where an employee is at in the claims process. Have they applied? Have they been approved, denied, pending? What information is needed? What are they being paid by the state? Because Oregon has said the employer has to allow any employee on paid leave Oregon to take those other sponsored leaves, whether it's sick, PTO, vacation, up to the amount where it makes the employee whole at 100% income. Okay, so if I'm an employee and I am earning $90,000 a year, and my paid leave Oregon benefit equates to about 80% of my weekly income. My employer has to know that, get that information of when I'm getting paid that, so that I can then turn around and take one sick day a week to make myself whole at 100%. Well, in other states, the employers have just been like, hey, I can't, my employee is asking for vacation or sick leave and I can't overpay them, but I'm obligated to not underpay them. When you have a carrier, you simply log into the system where you add and subtract employees and pay your bill, and you click on a claims tab and you see pending, approved, denied, every single benefit check that's gone out, or you simply call your account manager and ask them. And so there's that extra layer of customer service that comes with working with a carrier, and not to be less confident in the state, but the state's still 14 months away from paying these claims, right? So there's not a whole lot of details about where those claims are going to be paid. Francis Online, is that where the employee is going to, or the employer is also going to be access to, okay, my employee got that 80% this week, I need to get them 20%. So, you know, once we get more details, maybe Oregon will have a really good grasp of what to provide employers as they, you know, the employers are trying to manage having their employees access this. Yes.
Tyler, am I remembering correctly that employees only have to give their employer 24 hours notice?
If they can, yes. But keep in mind with a 0-day wait, I mean, again, unless it's a pre-planned surgery or a parent is declining in health where you're planning to go help them in 2 weeks, you know, a claim may be filed, you know, 8 days after your car accident when you get out of the hospital. And then you're already over the benefits on top of the time it takes to get attending physician statements and employer statement of what they're making. And it's a pretty, all things considered, in the best case, it's tough to pay claims 3 to 4 business days. So the 0-day wait makes it even more difficult. What other questions do you all have? All right, so here's the last slide before I leave you with the resources. As I mentioned in the beginning, employers really have to consider all of their programs that they're being offered, because, you know, 12 weeks of paid leave Oregon a year is obviously a really good benefit. So do you need to have that really rich sick leave bank? Most employers these days are just PTO, you know, vacation and sick in one. Well, you know, 6 weeks of PTO on top of 12 weeks of paid leave, is that necessary? I talked to a larger employer that had a paid parental leave they just rolled out last year, and they're going to get rid of it because they're not going to pay someone at 100% of their income for 6 weeks after they get 12 weeks of paid leave Oregon. I've had a conversation or two with HR folks that are asking for more headcount come September of 23 because they know employees are going to be out more because of this. And so for a 35 employee company, I need 2 more headcount on any given month because people will be out. So those sort of preparations on top of just the bare bones cost of the program, something that a lot of employers are looking at adjusting. As far as short-term disability goes, like I said, there's an offset. Standard is going to be decreasing all of our short-term disability costs to employers come September, because obviously instead of paying a 60% benefit for the majority of claims, it will now be just a $15 a week minimum benefit. Now, there are some short-term disability policies out there that have a $3,000 a week maximum or last 180 days. And obviously, there's benefits to keeping those in place. We'll tell you, a lot of employers are, because it's a lot, it's another cost for an employer. They're thinking about, well, let's make our vision voluntary, or we don't need to pay for STD anymore, but let's see if it's, you know, if people want it on a voluntary basis. Keep in mind, the employee is paying 60% of tax for premium that's privately insured. So now when you make a program voluntary or want to offer a new voluntary program, you're competing for discretionary dollars that are now going to the paid leave Oregon tax. Okay, to give you an idea, you know, the folks that are earning $132,000 at the cap there, they're contributing $800 a year to this program. That's 0.6% of $132,900. Okay, Someone earning $50,000 a year is contributing $360 to this program, which is $30 a month. There are mandatory reporting obligations from the employer. You have to notify your employees annually that they have access to this program. There will be quarterly reporting. The employer is going to have to report to the state whether they are with the public option or with the private option. They have to report quarterly saying, these are the employees that we are covering for this program and for how much. So payroll vendors are going to have to help generate those reports. I think that's it. And then there's a few web pages here. The first three are standard web pages. See the fourth one there, Oregon Paid Family Medical Leave Insurance is the state's website. The state has done a really good job in the last 6 weeks generating one-pagers. They host an open forum twice a week that anyone can call into and come off of mute and ask questions. So if you have questions or concerns, they're giving everyone an audience, which is fantastic. Like I said, you know, September 6th is a big date, and hopefully there's a lot more direction on what exactly is required as that private application comes to fruition.
Right. Thank you, Tyler.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thanks, Tyler.
Yeah, you got it.
Now I know why a lot of my friends don't regret moving out of Oregon.
Yeah.
Let's take a quick brief commercial. Now that we have everyone here, I'd like to just thank our two legislators that are here with us today, Senator Kim Thatcher over here in the front and Representative Kelmore Green. Thank you for showing up and engaging with our business community. It's really appreciated. You know, we wish more for legislators to do that and very well appreciate you. So next we have Shannon to present. No.
I don't really have anything to present.
Anything else you don't want to share? Okay.
I was gonna say, you just wanna make sure you know, you're gonna have to tell your employees that if you don't opt out, you can start making contributions in January and everything, there's no opting out, like you can't, it's not a voluntary benefit, you have to pay into it.
There also is a question in the chat. It says, what happens if/when an employee changes employers? They've been paying into it, not using this program. Do things start over? What if one employer is on public version and the other one on private?
Yeah, so let me address the public versus private. So our plan, standard plan. So if that person was at the public, employer that offered the public option came on to an employer with standard plan. Standard is planning to administer day one eligibility. Okay. What that means is the date someone's hired is the date they're covered by this program, because $1,000 earned is such a difficult administrative to figure out when that happens. Okay. So it's just easy for no one to fall through the cracks that they're covered from day one. Now the employer can choose whether to communicate they're covered after $1,000 or not. Okay. Because we just don't, normal member definitions is first of the month following the date of hire, first of the month following 90 days. It's just kind of off every benefit platform and every administrator's radar to cover someone with that $1,000 of earnings. Okay, so in that scenario, they would have coverage and it'd be based off of their recent earnings with their new employer. Now, I don't know the answer of an employee jumping from employer to employer from the state option. My guess is the state would be able to pull from the prior employer's report from the last quarter. Okay, ABC employee was insured with us with this prior employer. And so this is the amount of coverage they would get with their new employer. I don't think they've gotten that far down the road because they're still, again, 14 months away from actually paying those scenarios. And those are kind of one-off scenarios that employers are bringing up now that they kind of see and feel what most of the eligibility and plan design looks like. So hopefully, once the rulemaking is finished in September, those sort of scenarios are a little bit more clear.
I have another question here. What if the money is never used by the employee? What happens to that money?
Well, there's either the payroll tax that is going into the general pool to pay benefits for all the employees in Oregon. So if I understand that correctly, it'll be spent to other, it's similar to insurance, right? Everyone pays for car insurance, not everyone uses it, right? So obviously, they need to collect the funds and the disbursement for those that are eligible. So yeah, I mean, unfortunately, not everyone's gonna get to use this, and hopefully, they don't want to use it because they, are either sick themselves or taking care of a loved one that's sick.
Tyler, I'm sorry for putting you on the spot.
No, it's
but-
good.
So we know that the public option is gonna be 1%. And you've been quoting plans now for 3 months.
Yeah.
What do you see?
I would say at least half of the groups that we've presented to, we're giving them more than a 1% rate. Our actuaries and underwriters are super anxious about how rich this program is. No state or carrier has ever rolled out a program this rich. Okay, so no one knows how it's going to be used. I will tell you, when we manage unpaid leave, FMLA and OFLA for our larger clients, we see now industry demographics vary differently, but I would say on average, 10% of an employee population takes unpaid leave per year. So if you have 1,000 employees, 100 of those annually will go out and not even collect a check. They're going out for unpaid leave. They just want the job protection. You add in a 0-day wait, 100% income replacement for low wage earners, intermittent leaves down to 1 day, and maybe that 10% turns into 30% of the population this year is going to use this program. Nobody knows. So the state is giving us the flexibility as a carrier to assess the risk based on however we see fit, which is essentially, we're taking short-term disability experience on our book of business that we've been doing for 70 years and looking at those unpaid leave utilizations and looking at demographics to try and narrow down what our pricing is. But the bottom line is there's some groups that we're giving a 2.5% payroll rate to, and that's just a clear, and your best option is most likely the state-run program. And yeah, so it's.
As I understand it, the state's first opportunity to increase that 1% is January 1, 2025.
Correct, January 1st of 2025, which coincidentally is when all of our plans will be renewing. So all of the plans that we're proposing on now, they have a September 3rd of 2023 effective date. Yeah.
So when you're done with that, quick question.
Okay. Yeah. So our plans would go into effect September of 23 with a 16-month rate guarantee to renew January 1st of 2025. Yeah.
Thank you. Is that rate hike at the discretion of the agency, or is that a legislative piece that has to be done?
I'm pretty sure it's legislative.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. But if the program doesn't have funds, they're going to have to increase the rate, right? So most likely. Now, Washington was a little unique. They've got a similar program, and it's my understanding that they did actually need an increase the first year, but it happened to be during a pretty important election, and so it didn't take an increase. And then they just recently gave a 50% increase to their rate. Their rate went from 0.4% of payroll to 0.6%, which is 50%. It's still lower than 1%, right? New York rolled out one of the first paid family leave state-run programs in 2018. Their rate since 2018, I should say, has quadrupled. Now, again, their rate is still below 1%. But there is some anxiety because the plan is now being pre-funded for 8 months because of that shrinking or delaying it. And hopefully the state is in a good position come towards the end of 2024 is when that kind of analysis will happen to see where the funds are.
Tyler, is Standard gonna do anything to help employers if they were to go with the private to help them file this waiver thing?
So we're gonna provide them with whatever the state says is necessary. So a plan document, declaration of insurance, but the employer is gonna have to file on their own behalf on that Francis online system and submit the $250. There could be other things, because again, the state is in the middle of batch 4 right now. So they could add some things into there, but right now it's gonna be a plan document saying, okay, yes, meets all the requirements of equivalency. And then because we can't make them sign a contract, well, in advance of 12 months. And so it'll be a declaration of insurance. Yes, it's our intent to cover our eligible employees September 3rd. So we will do our very best, but keep in mind, we have a legal and compliance department that is going to have to review everything before we provide employers that. So if the state doesn't finalize things until early September, the next day they say, send us your applications. Well, it takes more than a day to, formally provide all of these required documents. Any other questions?
Any other questions? All right.
Guys,
Very good.
oh, go ahead.
We are good to go. Thank you for your time, Zach.
I was gonna say, you guys get the gift of time. We got it scheduled to 3:30 and off a little early. And I just want to preface too, as I was sitting here, I've had like 10 people text me or call me. My email has been hacked. So if you get an email from me regarding opening a file